Good afternoon, by the way. My name is Peter Pronk, and I'm the director of the SME Centre. And I think we are about to start. And if you don't mind, time is time, and it's 4 o'clock, so I think it's a good moment. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this online webinar about the impact of COVID-19. We organized together with our implementing partners and friends, the Belgium Chamber and the Italian Chamber, both located in China. Besides the impact it has on the society and our daily lives, COVID has certainly also seriously affected the economy. First, mainly and only in China, and now we notice also in the global economy, they have to deal with this. There's a lot being said and written about the current situation, future predictions, consequences, etc. However, it's difficult to gain a clear overview and understanding of the actual measures, policies, and the implications for each business and everybody's business. That's why, on a very short notice, but well received, we organized this online webinar. We noticed that online webinar became very popular in China after the outbreak. And the topic is crisis management during COVID-19 and the impact for this on European SMEs. Before proceeding, for the ones that are not familiar with the SME Centre, we are a project funded by the European Commission, implemented by 6 partners, which you can see on the slides: China British Business Council, who are in the lead, the French Chamber, Belgium Euro Chamber, the Italian Chamber, and the European Union Chamber. And this project has been in its second phase and about to land in April 6th. But the good news is that there has been an announcement for next phase, phase 3, and we hope that that will be up and running end of June, hopefully, and maybe a little bit later in July. What we offer is with our services and almost free for charge is training and market reports, guidelines, case studies, and of course also advice. Also, for one or more question about the coronavirus, of the impact it has on your business, you can just ask for advice free of charge via our website, which we refer to on the slides. Moving to today's speakers, we have, and all are very known to us and hopefully also to you, Grace Shi. She's the director of the TMF Group, formerly known as our dear friends of Ecovis. Koen Naber, well-known lawyer based now in Shanghai of R&P Lawyers, and Raoul Schweicher, managing director of MS Advisory in Shanghai. They will probably, and for sure, introduce themselves a little bit more. Just for your knowledge, each speaker will have 20 minutes. Since we own the control, we can mute everybody at any moment in time. We also hope that you share as many questions through the system so that they can be answered. And if the first speaker is talking, so please feel free to ask him any questions, and we will place these questions to them, and they can also see the questions. For now, with nothing else to discuss, I give the floor first to Raoul. He will talk about the Chinese government measurements in which he focuses on the measures that supports SMEs particularly. Good luck today, and learn a lot and have also a little bit fun.
Yes, hello. Can everybody hear me? I think that works. Great. Thank you very much, Peter, for the good presentation and the introduction. So first, a few words about me. We can go to the next slide. So like Peter said, I'm managing MS Advisory from the More network in Shanghai. We have roughly offices in 115 countries with around 30,000 staff members. We are specialized in supporting foreign companies in China. A few words to myself, maybe. So I'm originally from Luxembourg. I've been living and working in China for the last 8 years. And I'm also a board member of the Bensham Shanghai chapter. So regarding more, we are really focused on providing services to SMEs with heavy focus on accounting, taxation, payroll, as well as corporate services. And we've been active since 2011 in China. But I think let's go right into the agenda, dive right in. So today we will cover the following topics. We will give a brief overview of the response of the government to the outbreak. I don't have to give you too much repetition of the news recently. I'm sure that we are mostly aware of that. After that, we will discuss the policies that the central government has issued, especially also to support SMEs through these difficult times. And then finally, I will present some of the nationwide directives for financial and fiscal support. And then the aim will really be to see how do they trickle down, how are they implemented on a more local level. So let's start with the government response to this epidemic outbreak. First of all, as you know, the local government in Wuhan was very quickly putting the city into lockdown. Many other cities followed, especially in Hubei province, when at the height of this difficult time, 60 million people in Hubei province basically were in full lockdown. I think you can imagine that's almost like having the entirety of France being in quarantine. The central government decided to extend the Chinese New Year, as you know by now, I think. It went from the 30th of January to the 2nd of February. But a lot of local governments decided to actually make this a bit longer and only asked companies to return back to work after the 9th. Now, all these measures, of course, caused companies to stop the activities or decrease in the best case, and has seriously affected SMEs in particular. We came upon the number by the Chinese Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. They asked SMEs basically, how is the situation affecting you? When will you run out of cash? And more than 1/3 of the SMEs questioned really reported that they would run out of cash within 1 month. That is, of course, quite alarming. 86% in total were saying that they were running out of cash within the first 3 months. So the government decided to take up a lot of additional measures to support that. Now, if we let's dive right into the national policies. So, yeah, we can go to the next slide. Monetary policy was issued, first of all, in the form of the PBOC, arranging a special loan of 300 billion yuan to support financial institutions. This loan was especially for key enterprises who are supportive in the epidemic prevention and control of the virus. To give you an example, for Shanghai, until the 23rd of February, so roughly 2 weeks ago, until 2 weeks ago, there was 1.7 billion yuan already distributed to companies who were somehow supportive in the efforts, such as production, transportation, storage of medical equipment, etc. Then, for the financing support, the central government has also on the government level made funds available from the Beijing central government towards the different local governments, all in the effort to help with the financing of the economy. Okay. So now what I would like to focus a bit more on are some of the fiscal support measures that have been taken. Again, remember, this is on national level. So the January tax filing deadline, which generally this year was on the 17th of February, has been extended by 10 days to the 27th. the same now for the February tax deadline, which should come up in 10 days on March 16th, will be extended to March 23rd. Then if we go next, the industries that were basically hit the hardest, and here the government is naming transportation, catering, accommodation, and tourism. These four, they will be over to not, as was generally the case, carry their losses of previous years forward 5 years, but this has been extended to 8 years in total. As for the national policies regarding the VAT taxpayer rate, the generally non-deductible VAT rates issued by small-scale taxpayers has been reduced as of 1st of March this year until the end of May. All small-scale taxpayers in Hubei province will be fully exempt for this period, so this will, of course, be a huge help. At the same time, small-scale taxpayers outside of Hubei province will see a reduction from 3 to 1%. Concerning the Social Security, every year, of course, the base used for the calculation of Social Security is adjusted in April. This year, with the outbreak of the virus, the adjustment of the Social Security payment base has been postponed from April to July. So this means that the contribution to Social Security for employers and employees for this 3 months period will still be based on previous years, on the previous year contribution. In other words, if we are in a hypothesis of increasing salaries, this would mean an effective reduction of the Social Security contribution towards employers. Now in Shanghai, this number is now already being estimated as a further help to the companies of in the height of 10.1 billion yuan. If we go next, a few words about the exemption and or reduction for social insurance payments. So as you know, social insurance, we have 5 different insurances being pension, unemployment, work-related injury, maternity, and finally, of course, medical. In Beijing, this amounts to up to 27.8%, and is dependent on different regions. Now, important here is that from February to June this year, all SMEs outside of Hubei province, so effectively all SMEs in mainland China, are exempt from paying the 3 types of insurances, namely pension, unemployment, and work injury, which can amount up to 17% of employer contribution. For larger enterprises, however, the advantage is a bit less, as these 3 expenses are halved, nevertheless, from February to April. Now, a good indicator, of course, to see how you are classified is to see with the National Bureau of Statistics. They have clear guidelines to determine whether a company is large, medium, small, or micro. First, it will depend on your industry, and the second step, it's depending on operating income, total assets, but also the number of employees within your business. All companies in Hubei are exempt from February to June for all of the social insurance employer contributions. So that, of course, is a huge help. Additionally, enterprises can also apply for delaying the payment of the housing fund, or rules would be, punishments would be less should they be paid in or overdue. Now, yeah, to the next slide indeed. The companies that are providing first public transport services, second living services, and finally express delivery services for residents, these ones shall be exempted from VAT back to January 1st of this year. A few sentences maybe about the living services. So here we have cultural services, sports, education, medical, tourism, entertainment, and accommodation. So here it's important to dig a bit deeper to see whether you are qualifying. We already here in our practice in Shanghai have already started helping some of our clients to claim these VAT advantages, as long as you would fall into these sectors. How to handle this? It's a bit without trying to go into too many details, but the tax office would require you to not issue special FAPIAs, but rather general VAT FAPIAs, and then you have the option to choose the option of tax exemption. Here, what we would recommend the audience and everybody who is getting the report is really to communicate well with suppliers and customers as well, to make sure that this measure is being taken advantage of. If we can go to the next slide, yeah. So now a little bit of a look on the policy directives by the central government. So these are directives where the central government more loosely just defines the direction to where they want to see the policy going, but the local governments are then able to a certain extent, define themselves the more concrete measures on how they want to handle this. Regarding the financial support for SMEs, we will not go into the details of this part, but just to give you an overview, this includes, and this is a quite literal translation of the text, to promote financial institutions to reduce loan interest rates, also to increase credit loans and medium long-term loans to SMEs. So you can see the guidelines are quite vague. And then finally also, if companies would face difficulties, of course, to repay loans, etc., that they would be able to extend or renew while limiting punishments. On the next slide, I would like to go a bit, to dig deeper a bit on the fiscal support that we have. So the government, so here what you see, you can see the light blue part. This is the actual text from the central government. Below that, we have highlighted how some of the local governments have chosen to implement this already. Firstly, they instructed the local governments, of course, to offer reduction and exemptions of taxes and administrative fees. You see, it's a very vague directive, but local governments are taking it more concrete then. Implementations differ per region, but what we see is that, for example, paying real estate or urban land use tax can be applied for to be exempted. Also, we have seen several regions lowering electricity prices or other essential service fees. What we've heard in Beijing for SMEs, you can get a reduction of or waiving of special equipment inspection fees, sewage or road fees. If we go to the next point, so here local governments were instructed to generally promote the introduction of reductions and exemption on property rents. In general, companies without layoffs or fewer layoffs can apply for this rent exemption or reduction. If SMEs rent real estate from state-owned enterprises, then the rent will be reduced or exempted for a certain period, depending on where you are located. In Beijing, should you rent again from a state-owned enterprise, production facilities will be exempted for rent for February, and for office locations, this is reduced by 50% for February. In Shanghai, the rents of February and March will be exempt, and private landlords are encouraged to do the same. Now here may be good to give you a personal experience from our side. We are renting from a private company, and we have of course applied to them to have a rent reduction, also pointing out that the local government has strongly incentivized this or advised this, but unfortunately to no avail so far. So we're really looking forward to see how far will private property lenders actually give into this, and can they maybe be a bit more incentivized. But Koen later on, he will elaborate much more on this and also on how to negotiate rent reduction or exemption with landlords. Next point is the periodic deferral or return of social insurance premiums. So first, a few words about the return of these premiums. Most governments, including Beijing and Shanghai, will return 50% of the total unemployment. So only the unemployment part of the insurance premium paid in all of 2019, but only to companies that keep layoffs to a minimum. We do, however, have to note that usually this policy is already and has been implemented over the last years in Beijing and Shanghai, as they are trying to promote job stability. So the application has been irrespective in this case of the outbreak, even though they mention that it is due to the outbreak. The application for this is done online, and in Shanghai it is estimated that 140,000 companies in this year 2020 will benefit by having their burden reduced by a total of around 2.6 billion yuan. We then go over to talking about the deferral. No, still one back, exactly. The deferral of the premiums, which is linked to the possibility to simply pay in your social insurance premiums for your staff at a later date. It seems important here to note that the employees' payment, and this I think in the audience you might get questions from your staff or your colleagues, the employees' payment records for Social Security will not be affected according to official source. So the one thing we do have to say is that that this policy was actually released before the announcement of the exemption of the social premiums. We will see how these two go hand in hand. If we go next, yep. So finally, local governments are encouraged to implement the option of deferred payment of taxes. This is mostly helpful for SMEs who might have cash flow problems, as we saw, if you remember one of the first slides, the statistics of the SMEs in China. Now, regarding that statistic, I do keep in mind it was not only foreign SMEs, but really just SMEs in China. In most regions, we see that the local governments allow SMEs to apply for deferred tax payments up to a maximum of 3 months. Later on, Grace will also touch upon this in her presentation and other measures taken by the government to ensure smooth and safe collection of the taxes. I think it's time to conclude on this. So what we see is really we have a lot of policies that have come out and are still coming out to help companies through this storm. We reckon some will have more impact than the others, but unfortunately until now, the exact implementation, and I can feel that a lot of questions will be coming up regarding this, of most of these policies has yet to be released. It is also likely that most of these policies will become, and the implementation will become a bit clearer as the epidemic ends. One big takeaway from this is that measures and policies of these that have come out focus specifically on SMEs. Some important things to keep in mind are, it's important to understand the criteria that will be used later to determine your eligibility to receive said support. It is likely to see that the authorities will be trying to link the problems that a company may be facing to the virus outbreak. How they will do it, that largely still remains to be seen. So a final and very, I think, interesting and essential takeaway, also very practical, is that please note these policies are extremely localized. So these policies, they actually differ from district to district within the city where your company operates in. So you will need to take the time, call your responsible authorities and see how you in that area can benefit the best. That's all for us. Thank you very much, and I'll give back to Peter.
Well, thank you very much. Within the timeline, so we're very happy about that. I have a question for you that I would like to answer, if you could answer that, is that, do you have any knowledge at this moment in time, or maybe somebody else have, please send a message on that, if there are any SMEs operating in China from Europe that has faced bankruptcy already, and if that's the case, then could you share that?
Yeah, no, we are not at this moment. We have not been approached for bankruptcy or be it voluntary liquidation exactly due to the virus. We are involved in quite a few liquidations, but they are not due, I would say, primarily at the very least to this outbreak. Luckily, I would say.
Okay, good to hear. Good to hear. As long as there are no other questions for now, there is one from, by the way, Jan, is the VAT exemption did not apply to restaurants, is the question, Raoul.
The VAT exemption, no.
That's right, 2.2.
Yes, if we'll go back.
So your leaving sector does not include restaurants, I noted.
It should not include that, yeah, indeed. Need to see the details, but generally so far not, unless you would be able to say that you are a small scale taxpayer. In that case, you could fall under that rule. But yeah. But I think the restoration with restaurants and bars is certainly one of the sectors which will be hit the hardest.
That's right. Yeah. So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. By not having any more questions except somebody who cannot hear, but we can help you with that at this moment in time. I would thank you, Raoul, for your time and effort on this one, and please stay with us for further questions. Grace is a very long friend of the SME Centre, the project, as a board member of Benching in Beijing. And also she will now start to explain something about tax relief policies issued by the Chinese government during this period. Grace, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Grace Shi from TMF Group. I'm quite pleased to have this opportunity to share some observations and thoughts of how to manage the crisis during the epidemic period for SMEs. So before I start the presentation, please allow me to make a short introduction about who we are and who I am. So from this slide, you can see TMF Group is a global leader about providing the one-stop service for corporate secretary, payroll, and accounting services. So we have more than 30 years of experience for helping the companies to expand and operate internationally and locally. So right now, TMF Group has more than 7,800 professionals across 80 countries and with 125 offices worldwide. So one highlight here. So actually, TMF Group is a certified global ISO and ISAE firm who providing the consulting services. So it ensures us we can provide a high standard and qualified and more security services to our client. It also ensures us with a very high quantity about our client base. So right now we are working with more than 60% about the Forbes 500 companies worldwide. So who am I? So my background actually is CPA, and I have already in the accounting, auditing, and the tax advisory service industry for more than 20 years. It's really a long journey, but I really enjoy it because I really enjoy to helping my client to doing their business in China. So I like to meet them, I like to talk to them, I like to understand their business and about their success and their failures, their starts. I have to interpret all the financial figures to their business and also help them to figure out the risk and also find solutions. This is really very enjoyable. So during the journey, actually, I see a lot of successful cases and I also see a lot of failed cases. and what the right actions the company has done and what's wrong actions. So this is all the good case studies I would like to share with you also during my presentation. And if we don't have enough time, we can also exchange offline in future. So for today, actually, I prepared two topics. The first one is related for the best practice of financial planning. So, and the second one is the tax relief and incentives. So I believe this two topic is the very, very useful tool for helping the SMEs to go through the difficult time. The first one for the financial planning, I have to say this is my favorite topic. I can talk for one day or for 1 week about this, but I think because for the financial planning, it is play a very, very important role in the whole life cycle of each entity. It doesn't matter in good time or in normal time or in the difficult time as now. And the second topic is relevant to the tax relief policies. Everybody knows for the tax is a very one of the important factor for the company when you're running the company in China, right? So, but right now, as just now Raoul has shared, there's a lot of tax reliefs and incentives which can help the company to reduce your tax burdens. So this is very helpful. And thank you for Raoul. He has already covered most of the regulations. I will only add up some my insight afterwards. Okay, so let's start from the first thing about the financial planning. So from this chart, I think everybody see from the website every day. So for this coronavirus outbreak started from January 2020. And because of the increasing about numbers about outbreaks, it's bring a lot of difficulties in our normal business life and personal life. So many companies face the immediate, actually I should say it's really a sudden crisis because nobody knows it will happen in the first month of 2020, right? So, and as a result, right now you can see so many companies cannot have the normal work. They cannot production, they cannot do the normal trading. And also from the office wise, the staffs, they cannot return to their working location. So this kind of operational difficulty really creates the risk about the financial situations. I give you an example. I have recently talked with two of my clients. Actually, you know what they are saying is, hey, it's unbelievable. Our revenue, our sales dropped 30% more within these 2 months. So, and also the other one said they cannot also receive the payment easily. So, but they need to pay out the money every day and every month. How can they deal with this kind of difficulties? Especially another important view is they don't know when this crisis will be ended. So they ask me about the advice. I tell them, so if you have the uncertainty, you have more worry, right? But the worry cannot solve any problem. So rather than you asking when the crisis will be ended, I would suggest you to sit down and to have a look about your financial data, to make a new financial analysis and planning based on the current situation. And the figures will tell you what to do, what the decision you need to make, and where to go. So talking about the financial analysis and planning, I would like to share some general overviews. The typical financial planning covers the following point. So you need to understand how many working capital you need in your daily operation. And you also need to know about your cash flows, how many cash you will get, how many cash you will pay out, what's the status about the ending cash balance in your bank account. And you also need to know the gross margin, right? So what's the gross margin for your product? What's the gross margin for your project? And in addition, you also need to plan your EBITDA. This is you need to tell to your shareholder. You also need to tell to your investor. And meanwhile, you also need to have understanding what's the investment and the financial activities you need to do from the long-term run or from the short-term run. So overall, it's the typical financial planning covers so many elements. But here, right now, everybody know we are in a very difficult situation. I want you to, for all the audience, think about 10 seconds to tell me which element you think is the most important and the crucial point we need to consider during the financial planning. You can type in the Q&A here. So I will know your result. What's your answer here? So I give you 10 seconds, okay? Yes.
Grace, we can.
I already see some answers. So the majority for the answers is for the cash flow. Very true. I totally agree with you. In the difficult time right now for the working capital, especially for the cash, it's the most important thing. What's the cash meaning? It's like in our body, cash is the blood. So we can somehow hurt our hand or hurt our legs, but if we are lack of blood, then we will die. So same to the company. If you are lacking about the short-term cash, the company will face immediately the survival problem. So therefore I will focus more about the cash flow planning in the next presentation. So I would like to share you an example here. So I don't know how many of you is familiar with the figures in the financial statement. So I assume you can understand a little bit. This is the balance sheet of one company, we call it company A. So you can see from the figures, actually this company's financial position is not bad. They have very good liquidity ratio, and also their liability ratio is also not bad. But especially until 2019, they have an okay position from the assets part. But however, if you go into the other slides, you can see about their income statement. It also looks okay because they have a lovely gross margin and also they have profit. But when you're looking at their cash flow in the right side of the slides, you can see actually they are not in a very healthy cash flow status. All the sources from the cash is sourced either from the debts or from the increasing about the liabilities to their vendors. So by only using their operating income, they cannot be survived. At the end, for the whole year, about 2019, they only generate increased 1 million about the cash in their bank account. So, but they still have some debts in their accounts receivables. What this means? It means if in the downside period of the time, like now, if they cannot generate the revenue by the sales, and then they will immediately facing the cash flow problem. So I can tell you this company's business owner will already facing a problem from February 2020. Why? We can go into the next slides. So the important reason is you can see from the balance sheet from that company, by the end of 2019, they only have 5 million in their bank account, but they have a lot of debts, and also they also facing the difficult time for the operational side. So their cash is not enough. So what's the meaning for good cash flow? The company's financial condition depends on its ability to generate sufficient cash to pay so many costs. You need to pay to your creditors, you need to pay to your suppliers, right? And you also need to pay to your employees. You also need to pay a lot of fixed costs, like the rental, like the storage, like the property management, like all the IT costs. Surely you also need to pay the tax. So from this, you can see some of the cost you can save because this is a variable cost. If you have less revenues, and then you can saving some variable costs, but you should say there is a lot of cost is a fixed cost. For example, for the employees' salaries, for example, for the rentals, for the ITs. It doesn't matter your business going on or not, you need to pay that. So this, I really hope the audience can keep in mind. The fixed cost right now in this difficult time is very crucial for you. You need to make at least 3 to 6 months analysis for your cash forecast in order to avoid suddenly in one day you notice you don't have enough cash to pay all the relevant costs, and your company will face trouble. So it's a very easy slide. You can see how to preparing a cash flow forecasting. For surely, you need to forecast the sources about cash, and you need to also focus about the spending of the cash. But I need to highlight one thing here. Normally for the cash planning, somehow we need always to do in 3 kind of scenarios, right? We have the best case, we have the normal case, and we have the worst case. Right now, I believe most company has already do the best and also the normal scenarios. But right now, you need to redo again about the worst case scenarios. So we continue with that company A's example. You can see based on their new forecasting for this 4th quarter for 2020, there is a lot of expenses will happen, and we'll also need the cash. As a result, for the next chart, please. As a result, they need a lot of cash for the financial activities. Please give me the next. Yeah, from the 3rd one, you can see based on the worst case analysis. Go back, please. Please help me to go back to the other slides. Go back, please. Thank you. So from here, you can see actually based on the worst case study, the company really need a lot of cash to source a lot of cash from quarterly 1 and quarterly 2 for 2020. So it means the owner need to take actions now, what they can source, where to sourcing revenue cashes and where to saving cashes. So in next slide, I have already summarized some takeaways. So how to manage the cash flow and what's the solution you need to consider for your company to reducing the cost and to generate cash. So I give you some, I will pick up something here and to share with you. And because this is due to the different, companies' characters, it cannot be 100% suitable for your company, but you can take it as a start and think again how to find solutions for your company. From sales-wise, I would like to suggest right now, since a lot of revenues already happened for 2019 already, I suggest your salespeople can proactively chase in the receivables. This is a very easy way to do, and it can collect the money. So this is you can put into the first priority. And the second one is you can right now can try to sign some new contract. Maybe the new contract can with some discount or some good good terms to your client, but at least you can get some down payment from signing the new contract. And the next, please go back. Yeah. And also the other example for the sales, you can also consider of the new services or products to generate more income and cash. I give you an example. One of my clients actually they are doing more, manufacturing, producing materials, but due to this, epidemic period, they are trying to changing some their sales service lines. So rather to sell something, they provide some, they provide some maintenance services and also give some solutions. So trying to change their service line to the, to the services instead of the production. So this can also generate some cash flow for the business. And for the cost-wise, it's very obviously you can extend the payment terms with your vendor, and you can also try to negotiate the lower purchase price and the rental rate with your vendors and with your landlord. The other thing is for the fixed costs, like the HR costs, you can also try to manage by using some flexible working arrangement to reduce the fixed HR cost. This is very important. And for the long-term run, if you want to reduce the fixed costs for the HR side, you can also outsource some services to reduce it. And I want to pick up the very two important thing here. If you, based on your financial analysis about the cash flow, you figure out you are really facing the short-term cash problem. And then you need to consider right now, take actions. Either you need to ask for the shareholder loan and the new capital injection, because everybody for this two action, it takes some time. You need to do in advance. Otherwise, you will face trouble very soon. So I hope this can be some takeaways for you about this presentation for the financial plannings. So regarding the tax incentives and reliefs, as Raoul has already covered major about my slides already for the contents, I only want to highlight something here. For the small scale taxpayer, you need to understand right now the tax exemption is applied. Please also trying to apply the right rate. This can really save your cash for your company. For next one, I don't want to repeat here more about the company incentives. Please remember all the costs relevant to this coronavirus happens, like the mask and so on. You can definitely deduct directly from your corporate income tax. Your tax burden will be reduced. And also for the individuals, for all the donations and also for all the monies you spend for helping this crisis, it also can be deductible. So it means your take-home pay will also can be increased about this. What else? Let me see. So we can skip this slides. Yeah, one more important point here, because all the company purchase a lot of materials, and like the mask and so on. So this can be deducted, but you need to also remember you need to ask for the tax invoice for that. If you cannot, you also need to ask for other supporting documents like the receipt and also material list, so that you can ensure you can deduct from your corporate income tax. Here is more relevant to the tax collection and the management procedures. I don't want to repeat too much here because of time limitation. I just want to highlight one thing. So if you really have difficulties for your tax payment, please do make the application in advance and make the proper documents, so you can also solve your cash flow problem by defer some tax payment. Next slide, please. So for the pension and insurance, I don't want to repeat again, but the other very important point is for the disabled fund. Several years ago, so the government had started to charge the disabled fund, and right now there's a new regulation to say for the SMEs, if your entity is less than 30 people, you can exempt for the disabled fund. This is also a big cost about the company. So please pay attention to this. Yeah, I think before I end up about my presentation, I would like to highlight one thing again. For the tax relief and incentives is the policy from the government, but the company also need to make sure you are doing the right financial calculation. For example, if you really have some uncertain cost, you need to accrue it in your financial statement, so that your corporate income tax from the quarter-wise or annual-wise can be reduced accordingly. So this also for the tax burden is also relevant to your financial planning, and also the correct calculation about your financial profit result. So this is also one important thing I would like to share with you. Okay, so thank you so much about listening my sharing. If you have more questions, please let me know.
Grace, thank you very much. At this moment in time, no questions have arrived, but that doesn't mean that during the period that Koen will have his talk, that maybe people can ask some more questions. We have one general question which I will ask at the end about the e-commerce companies, but that will be back. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Koen, negotiating rent relief. In all cases, we usually ask a lawyer to help us when there is a problem. In this case, it would be great to ask a lawyer before we can tackle the problem. And in this case, we ask Koen to give us some insight on this topic. Koen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So before I will take you on this, let's say, legal journey along, let's say, the force majeure principle that is definitely applicable in the current crisis situation.
We don't hear you. Koen, we don't hear you.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I hear that the other attendees can hear me, so I will just continue. Okay, so if somebody could tell Brecht to switch to the next slide. Okay, perfect. A few short words about myself and the company that I work for. So for the people that have not don't know me already, my name is Koen Naber. I work in China since 2010, and my expertise is basically helping retailers, and especially during these difficult times, you can imagine that there's a lot of work to be done. Aside from retailers, I also help various other companies with commercial contracts, dispute resolution, and we also do a fair bit of employment and IP work. Then, aside from that, I'm also a part of the Benchum as a vice president, and I'll see that we already switched to the next slide. First, want to mention still that our law firm has offices in Beijing and Shanghai, and we are at the moment with around 40 licensed lawyers. And as we are a Chinese law firm, we can also advise and represent clients in court and arbitration procedures. You can already go to the next slide now, in which you see a few examples on the work that we do. I will later share my presentation with the people that would like to have a copy, so you can have a look at for yourself. I think that we can better just jump into the material, and so please go to the next one. And I think that for definitely for some of you that are intending, everyone is looking at the moment at their contract with for services, or for example for an office lease, and check if there's anything in the contract written down that would save you in the current situation. For 95% of the cases, I have to say that you can probably find an article that is similar to the one that I have copy pasted in my presentation. Maybe you can just read along. It basically says that if any party cannot perform an agreement due to a natural disaster, in some agreements it is actually specified all the different items, or they just only refer to force majeure. And if you so one party cannot perform, such party may be exempt from all or part of its obligations to the extent of the influence by force majeure. Now, what does this mean? And I want to, in my whole presentation, I will use, let's say, a tenant and landlord kind of relationship as an example. So let's say that a landlord cannot offer you an office in which people can work. For example, because of some government order, that would definitely be the case in Wuhan, the employees cannot go into the building. It means that the landlord is basically not performing its part of the agreement. And this article then says basically that the landlord may be exempt from its obligation to provide you with, let's say, this office to use. Now, it should be clear from this that in this particular article only helps the landlord and not the tenant. So for most of my clients, this is not really useful. Although I say, please check your agreements, because sometimes there is maybe something in there that could help you. Now, even if there's no let's say article that deals with force majeure or something similar, like something even more specific, like an epidemic is mentioned in the agreement, then you can always still rely on the force majeure articles from the PRC contract law. So if we go to the next slide, I have noted the two relevant articles. I cannot see them yet. Okay, yes, here are they. Now, it basically, Article 117, it basically says the same as the article that I have I have like already shown on my previous slide. Basically, it says here that if a party is unable to perform a contract due to force majeure, it is exempted from liability. So now, before I made an example of a landlord and a tenant, but also in the situation that you are, for example, a buyer of products and your supplier cannot deliver the goods that you have bought from them in based on force majeure, dus based on the whole current situation, they are not able to supply you with the demanded goods. This article helps the supplier of the products and says basically, okay, because he could not foresee this, so he should not be liable for any liabilities that come up out of the non-performance by the supplier. I made it. I highlighted red. What under the law is seen as a force majeure event. Basically, it is an event which are unforeseeable, unavoidable, and insurmountable, which means that you cannot overcome this situation. And then for force majeure, let's say, to use this kind of article, it is always important that you timely notify the other party so that the other party can react on that. And also you need to provide proof that there has been a force majeure event. And in the current situation, that is a little bit easier than normal because several governments have already provided, let's say, their opinion on this and have confirmed that the current situation could be seen as force majeure. Now, that said, so what do we do? So basically, based on the contract and based on the force majeure article in the contract law, we are not really that as for example as a tenant that cannot really help us. So is there something else laid down in the Chinese law that could be of use? Now then we move to the next slide, and this is a very interesting article that basically it is an interpretation of the Supreme Court of China, so it's definitely an important notice. And what does this notice say is that, and I will just literally read this, where any significant change in the objective environment has taken place after the formation of a contract, which could not have been foreseen by the relevant parties at the time of entering into the contract. So that is first. So in the situation at hand, the environment has dramatically changed compared to the situation before the contract. And it's obvious that this could not have been foreseen. So I believe that this article applies in the current situation. I skipped the red part, then I will continue. Rendering the contractual performance of the contract manifestly unfair to a relevant party or rendering it impossible to realize the goal of the contract, the People's Court shall confirm whether the contract shall be varied or dissolved in accordance with the principle of fairness. Now, what does this mean? It means that if, because of this change in circumstances, let's say the outbreak of the epidemic, if the situation has changed in such a way that makes the performance of the contract unfair. Now, as an example, I own for example, a store in a mall. Yeah? Because of the outbreak, the traffic of the customers in the mall reduces by 90%. And I've seen like clients where this is really the case. Now, like if you would have concluded the lease contract knowing that let's say the traffic would only be 10% of the normal traffic in the mall, you would never have agreed to the level of rent that you're paying at the moment. So if you follow this reasoning, you could approach the People's Court and ask them to vary the contract, which basically means change the rental level, or even dissolve it. Now, for dissolvement, I don't think you have a very strong position, because probably this whole epidemic will be over in a few months from now. So I think that argument is not strong. However, definitely you could approach a landlord and require them to let's say reduce rent, and maybe even like really substantially. And that's also what I've seen with some of my clients where we have helped out. Then I go back to the part in red, because it's a little confusing, not only to you but also to me. It says here, and does not belong to any commercial risk occasioned by any force majeure cause. In my opinion, if like, let's say such change of circumstances is caused by force majeure, it is per definition maybe not, or like very likely not to be a commercial risk, because this is something that is completely out of the control of any party. So now I will continue with the next slide. So basically, I have already given you an overview of how a contract could help, what or not help actually. Also, force majeure clause in the PRC contract law doesn't seem to help much. However, principle of change in circumstances is something that we should definitely have a close look at if you're negotiating rent relief. Then now please go to the next slide, where I will provide a short overview of some governmental guidance that you could use as a tool to approach, let's say, landlords. So first, I have noted, and this has already been mentioned by Raoul in a certain way, that there have been certain levels of government. This is the city level, where there has been specific guidance mostly for state-owned enterprises, but also for other types of enterprises for other types of properties to provide certain amount of rent relief. Now let's just look at the one that we have in front of us. So this basically applies only to medium-sized, small, and micro enterprises. Now, medium-sized is not that small. It is either less than, if you have less than 300 employees, in general you apply, or less than 200 million RMB in turnover. These are national, I have to say, these are the national criteria. So actually, if you really go into more detail to see if you should apply, then you need to double confirm the actual, like, let's say, district levels, as if they follow this interpretation. You see at the first bullet point, that's state-owned premises. So basically, premises that are owned by SOEs and that are used for production and operational use. So they carve out here, I guess, properties that are held as investment. With no or few employee layoffs, so they will also not provide you with any rent relief if you have fired a big part of your staff. Then you should be entitled to rent-free in February, and then for office use, this amount should be half, so it's only 50% in February. And then you'll see, if you don't have a state-owned entity as a landlord, then for other types of premises, they encourage landlords to abate rent for tenants upon mutual negotiation. Now, this, like, of course, you still need to. That's why I say you still need to use maybe some other tools that I've already mentioned before as armor to, to accomplish some sort of rent relief, and also, really push landlords, because if I see too many times that people are a little bit too polite, and that doesn't work. So please be very aggressive and try to put your foot down that you want something that sounds fair. there are subsidies provided to these landlords, so there is also a little bit of relief on their side. And you will see on the next slide that the district level is actually much more beneficial. So before I gave Beijing like city as a example, this is a Chaoyang district. However, there are a lot of different districts in Beijing and also in Shanghai that have similar kind of policies in place. Typically, we see the same medium-sized, small, and micro enterprises can apply for this. For state-owned premises, rent-free in February, 50% of rent in March and April. So this basically already means, it's equivalent to 2 months of rent-free. And for office, 50% in February, March, and April, which is 1.5 months of rent. For public institutions, they need to follow the same rules as for state-owned enterprises. And for other types of premises, the same as what I already mentioned under the Beijing rules, they encourage landlords to negotiate and come up with a fair amount of rent relief. Now, aside from these governmental guidances, there have been also some opinions issued by several, let's say, courts. I will first share with you the opinion of the court in Beijing. So if we go to the next slide, it's quite a bit of wording, so it would be good to have it on the screen. And I'm just waiting for that. Yeah, now I see it also in front of me. So I would suggest that you read the bold part of the text. Now, yeah, first they say you should check if there's anything stipulated in the lease contract that would help you, or that you would be entitled to rent relief in this pandemic situation. Now, yeah, that is basically actually my first slide. I already have explained that it's unlikely that the contract would help, but definitely worth a try and have a look if there is anything that could be of help. Then we go to the second part, and this applies to yeah, like a normal retail store. Please go back one slide, please, because I'm still discussing, let's say, the Beijing court opinion. So I'm just waiting for it because it is quite complicated if you can read along. Okay, second part, you can see that for commercial shops, it's basically a retail store, if the shop starts to operate after a short period of closure and suffers a decrease in turnover, or the shop keeps operating as its business is closely related to residents' food, clothing, housing, and transportation needs, and the shop only suffers decrease of passenger flow, it should be considered a normal commercial risk. So this is this commercial risk that we also saw in the principle of change of circumstances. So basically they say if you are closed for a very short period of time, or you are in let's say maybe you're a convenience store, or you're have a Kuaidi business, you're probably not that much affected. So in that case, this is a normal commercial risk, and probably you can also not rely on the article that I referred for below, the principle of change of circumstances. I think there is something, I will come back to this later, because I definitely think that there is still something to argue for, actually, although this what they have written down in this opinion. Then second bold part, third, I mean, now yeah, they also refer to the measures that were already issued by the several governmental bodies regarding like rent relief, and you can use it as a reference. And these are for the two examples that I gave for Beijing City and Chaoyang District. So they also say, please have a look at that, because that is definitely important. And then there's a very probably a very relevant part for most of you on this webinar. It says that for leasing of factory buildings and office buildings, although the resumption of work has been delayed due to the coronavirus outbreak, the extension of the original Spring Festival holiday for 1 to 2 weeks will not have any substantial impact on the tenant's production and operation, and therefore the tenant request for rent relief will not be supported. Now, I find it hard to believe that this does not have a substantial impact on the tenant's business. That said, yeah, they are quite clear that only let's say the reason that the holiday is extended cannot be, let's say, a reason that you're asking for rent relief. But let us look at some opinions that were provided by the Shanghai High Court on the next page, and then it will become maybe a little bit more clear, because I think that it is a much shorter opinion, and I think it is maybe much more useful. So please go to the next slide. So there was a Q&A session in which the following question was posted: can commercial tenants claim rent relief during the coronavirus outbreak? And now, yeah, the answer was by the High Court was that you need to look at this from a case-by-case basis. Makes sense. And then it says the following: if the premises cannot be used normally due to the coronavirus outbreak, the tenant's request for rent relief can be supported. And in my opinion, this is key. Something that is by a lot of people overseen is at the moment, and this is just based on a general like law principle. At the moment that one party does not perform its obligations, then the other party also may delay or not perform. Now, in the example of a landlord and tenant relationship, I can you could think about the following. Let's say that you rent an office, but the property management or the landlord itself or the government does not allow you to go into the building anymore. That means that the office cannot be used, and that is the whole purpose of the lease. This means that you could argue that the landlord has not performed its part of the agreement, and because the landlord is not performing, the tenant could do the same by not paying rent. So this is I believe something that everyone should keep in mind. So check: has your office been closed and your employees were not even able to enter? Now that could be already some grounds that you're asking for a certain amount of rent relief. Then the red part is let me see. Then we go to the red part. If the tenant's business income is affected only due to the decrease of customer flow during the coronavirus outbreak, the tenant's rental payment obligation generally not exempted. So this is in case of a retailer. You cannot only say, because my customer flow is reduced by 90%, I will not pay any rent anymore. However, then the next part is the bold text. If the coronavirus outbreak has a significant impairment to the tenant's revenue, which is basically always the case, the rent can be adjusted according to the principle of fairness. So I believe that they really look at basically the principle of the change in circumstances, and if you can substantiate that your revenue went down with 80%, then I think you have a good argument to ask for, like, for example, a reduction of rent of 80%. I believe that this is almost the end of my time, and that's also well timed then, because the next slide is basically where I provide our website and my email address. So yeah, let's continue during the Q&A session. Thank you for your attention, everyone.
Great, thank you. for this. I hope that everybody can hear us. We had some technical problems, but good that everybody could hear you. That's the most important thing. There are a couple of questions, and let me start with one for Koen, which is about what are about the rent in the industrial parks. There is a possibility to reduce the rent. So the question is more related not to office spaces in cities, but more on workplaces in industry parks. Is there any difference in what you just explained, Koen?
Yeah, I like, because we have been reviewing lease agreements for all kinds of different clients, like that are industrial clients. Some of them are in logistics. A lot of retailers, of course, because they are really in trouble at the moment, and it all comes down to the same like let's say point, and that is, are you able to use the property for the purpose that you rent it for? So at the moment that you cannot use it in a proper way, then I believe that you should be entitled to some sort of rent relief. So if you rent a factory and your factory cannot be used in any way because of this corona outbreak, you have a, I guess you have a good good argument to ask for some sort of relief. Okay, and yeah, so I think that I hope that answers your question. Who come like? Okay, shall I just go to the next question that I see on the screen? Is as somebody asked, like, who compensate a private landlord? Yeah, that is unfortunate. There's not like there are some measures like provided by the government for let's say relief of. I think they are also talking about reduction of interest payments on the real estate, but there's not basically no article that would help you as an owner of the property in a way. Still, I think that the consensus in court is that basically some kind of like how do you say it, that the losses should be shared like in a fair way. So definitely if these kind of cases go to court, there will definitely be in a lot of cases that the judge would argue, okay, I believe it is fair that the rent will only be reduced with 50% and not not more than not more than that.
Okay, thanks. We were out again for a second, but did you also answer the question from Jan on who compensates the private landlords if it's a government which forbids the tenants from entering the building and using?
No, yeah, I meant that it's very. I meant that there are some government measures, but like basically there's not really a protection in place there. So yes, I answered that, Peter. And then I will just continue. Like I see another question from Tom. Does this also apply when you rent from a company like WeWork? Yes, I believe so. If you were not, because I know that WeWork has shut down some of its offices for quite some time. Like if you cannot enter, that means that basically the agreement that you have with WeWork, that the company WeWork cannot perform its side of the agreement. So I believe that you have a very valid argument that you can just hold your rental payment for at least that period of time. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, actually, we have a guideline for how to define the SMEs. So it's based on a different industry. It has a different criteria. For example, like the staff members and also for the revenues. So it really depends on the industry. So we can also share later about this to the audience.
Yes, actually, I think it's a very interesting question. I myself, shortly after the outbreak started, looked into the stocks of some of the larger e-commerce companies to see how this would affect them. And I think just recently, Jingdong has also had very good earnings. This was rather for the last quarter. But all in all, what we see, and this is also linked with the working from home, people have just gone much less out and much more has been ordered. If we also take into consideration the tax incentives, especially to delivery, to the delivery industry, then we can see that I think one of the industries that will come out better out of this, or will, how to say, will survive a little bit better this crisis, will actually be the e-commerce industry. But I think it's very early to determine this, and it's, yeah, for now it's my opinion only. Yeah, yeah, indeed, and especially if you look in, it's not really the topic now, but if you look in online, the financial, sorry, the large tech giants, the online gaming, even our company, we switched quite quickly to Microsoft Teams. So I think for all online tech companies, it might even be an opportunity.
Peter, I see one more question here on force majeure. I see in the chat about, is it like the one? I don't think so. There's one question about if a contract, in case a contract where services and products have already been delivered and used by the client, but payment was to be due, for example, on January 31st, but force majeure was called on January 29. Is there any recourse or precedent whereby the payment in question should still be paid? I just want to make clear here is that force majeure only comes into play if one of the two parties is not able to perform the contract. And in this question, in the question from Justin, like I see that because actually already the services and the products have been provided, there is no force majeure does not come into play. Well, because also the other party, the only thing that they need to do probably is make the payment. So the service provider is performing because they delivered products and gave the service, and the other party, they simply only need to pay. That's their only obligation probably. So I would say no, it should not affect the contract at all, and they should just pay the amount that is according to the contract. I hope your question is answered. Yeah. Yeah, now, yeah, that really depends on what kind of business you're in. I think for an office lease, it's probably difficult to come up with valid arguments. Although I can tell you, I am advising one particular retailer that has many stores in China. They want to close one at the end of June, and now we are looking into it, and they say there's no purpose anymore for us to open the store actually anymore, because we know for sure that we will not be able to make any money until June. So we'll definitely have more cost than revenue. And in that sense, maybe you could use, let's say, not completely use force majeure, but definitely you can use the current situation to argue that it is basically fair that you hand back the premises earlier and terminate the agreement. For office, I believe it's more complicated. Yeah, I see. My store is under construction. Restaurant, I'm unable to build my store because constructors can't come back to work. Yeah, yeah. Now, yeah, no, yeah, and I understand. And this is always also partly it is commercial discussion with your landlord. You know, if they already have your deposit, it is in practice quite difficult to get it back. So if you need to start a legal procedure, it will cost you a lot of money. So yeah, I still think that in these kind of situations, it's your own like negotiation, like let's say with the landlord to see how you can up with an acceptable solution. But it's definitely not easy. Yeah, you could. Yeah, no, yeah, I know there is like so, but that depends on how like I believe like and just this is something that I will not like just don't bite me on what I'm now saying, but like I believe that there are certain cases where if, for example, the staff cannot work at all for a month, that you can lower their salary to even to a minimum wage level after 1 month. But this really depends on the situation. So like yeah, we have I have a few of my clients. They have also substantial operations in Wuhan, and there yeah we are really looking into these kind of like rules to see how we can yeah like maybe yeah just to reduce the exposure that these clients have there. So you can, there definitely are some ways to reduce salary, but not if they are just able to work like normal. Like this is only in very extraordinary situations. Yeah. Yeah, Peter, if people want, if people would like to have the presentation that I gave, and I guess for maybe the same for Grace and Raoul, you just leave a message on my LinkedIn or give your information to the EU SME Centre, the Belgium or the Italian Chamber, and I will make sure you get a copy if you believe it's useful. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.